to the shooting of an off-duty Chicago police officer. Kennedy Expressway outbound. It's stop and go from Bryn Mawr before Canfield after a crash. About 30 minutes downtown to O'Hare. Inbound, it's 23 minutes. Inbound Eisenhower traffic is low Manheim to Des Plaines Avenue. 30 minutes, 390 to downtown. Outbound 28. Stevenson, 33 minutes, 355 to the drive. The Ryan, 17 minutes from 95th to downtown. I-65 has roadwork delays northbound from 231 to 101st Avenue, where the right lane is closed. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Later today, thunderstorms, windy. There could be some flooding rains, high near 90, and we can't rule out the chance of an isolated tornado as a cold front merges up with what remains of tropical rainstorm Cristobal, with a low of 73 overnight, and clouds and sun with a chance of a pop-up shower or storm tomorrow, and a high of 82. 74 right now. Next news at 8. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Can't wait to hear what the triple threat and Governor Spalding have to say about that WHO declaration that coronavirus is not spread by those who are asymptomatic.
Yeah, they found transmission from asymptomatic and people is very rare.
Yeah, for the interests of advancing a recovery in Chicago and Illinois, you may want to reconsider some of your draconian lockdown policies in the wake of the new science.
And the new data.
Well, that's science.
I know. Well, yeah, they always say the data and the science are leading our decisions.
Uh-huh. We'll see. Because, as we know from a conference call that Lori Lightfoot had with the 50 city council members, some neighborhoods around the city didn't fare so well over the last 10 days. Alderman Emma Mitz, 37th Ward, West Side, was like the wild, wild west out there. Michelle Harris, 8th Ward. It's like, what are we going to have left in our community? Nothing. Alderman Suzanne Sadlowski Garza, my ward is a blank show. They are shooting at the police. I've never seen the likes of this. I'm scared. That was something Lightfoot even said. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen blank like this before, not in Chicago. Ed Burke saying worse than 68.
Yeah, the last time we had a curfew enacted.
Alderman Ray Lopez and Lori Lightfoot don't get along. Lopez said his Southside Ward was a virtual war zone. Gang members armed with AK-47s threatening to shoot black people. Lightfoot said Lopez was 100% full of hooey. Lopez said, well, F you then. Lightfoot said, I understand you want to preen. Lopez said, Mayor, you need to check your effing attitude.
Wow.
This is going well.
Conversation not for children.
These are the people in charge, by the way, and they're all of the same philosophical and political disposition. How's it going in the city? How's it going in particular on the west and south sides of the city? I'm happy to report, despite what Mayor Lightfoot said, that in Streeterville, where I live, no issues. No issues.
You're lucky.
Few, if any, of the just a few, actually. There's a couple I can think of the businesses are boarded up. No problem. No problem getting carry out from Carson's or some of the other restaurants there. Wandering around, going to the dog park. No worries. Meandering around Navy Pier, which, by the way, is opening up. But Navy Pier can open, but bars can't. Restaurants can't. Okay.
Can't have summer camp.
It's logical.
Can't have contact sports.
How's it going with One Mindset? For more on this, pleased to be joined by Jahmal Cole. He's an activist, public speaker, founder and CEO of My Block, My Hood, My City, and author of If It's Not Regular, How to Recognize Injustice Hidden in Plain Sight. Jahmal Cole, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here. How y'all doing this morning?
Good,
Hi,
good.
Jahmal.
So, what's your assessment of how the city has been handled over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I don't want to devalue, how people are feeling out there. I don't want to say, hey, I agree with you guys, but don't do this, or I agree, but don't do that. But, I'll just say I agree with the protest, and, I think there's a way that we can resist constructively. I'm not for busting up businesses in your own neighborhood, because these communities were already divested from for too long. You're busting up businesses at Captain Hard Times, windows and stuff, and this is the same small business that delivers water to the schools because they don't got no air conditioning.
Yeah.
Or it's the same business that buys or pays for the newsletters for all the block clubs. I mean, these are like small businesses in your own neighborhood, so they don't deserve that. So I think we got to find a way to find out, put a list of demands and figure out what we want instead of just tearing down our own neighborhoods.
I think I think that makes perfect sense. And so, as you survey the landscape, what's the problem or problems?
Yeah, man, people are fed up. And, the deal is really simple. You stop killing us and hold authority accountable, then people won't protest the institutional murder, and oppression of black people by authority. That seems to be the stop killing us, and hold authority accountable, and we won't protest. I mean, I think that
but in Chicago and Illinois, who's the authority? Authorities. Who's the Cook County State's Attorney? Who's the Cook County Board President? Who's the mayor? Who's the governor? Who are all the state legislators? Who are all the aldermen? Who have they been for as long as I've been on this planet, more or less?
I think we're talking about the police here. We're talking about the police.
Oh, the police. Well, who's in charge of the police? Who's the civilian authority in charge of the police? Isn't that the mayor's office?
We need those contracts need to be reviewed. I mean, a lot of times in the police contract, an officer can shoot somebody and not have to even report for 72 hours on what happened. So, I mean, people want those type of things reviewed in the police contracts, and also there needs to be just reform in general. Man, a lot of officers don't really know the history of their communities before they police them. I think it'd be good for them to actually have tours of the neighborhoods prior to policing them and get to know the assets of the community based upon through the eyes of the people that live there. I think there's creative ways we can go about this to bridge the relationship between policing and community. But again, and the consent decree says that there's a problem and we need to address it.
Well, CPS. I know the CPS is re-looking at their CPD contract with CPD. But okay, I don't care what you do with it. If Kanye thinks it should be discontinued, then that's fine with me. I don't really care. But I'm sorry, who's in charge of CPS? How do you get around having a conversation about accountability when you want to talk about systems and not talk about who's in charge of the systems in 2020 Chicago and Illinois?
And that's a good question. We need to. That's why people are protesting. A lot. Believe it or not, man, a lot of people don't know what to do. Like they don't know how to get involved.
I believe it.
It's the way that they're expressing. And some people, they ain't even have my size. I was just grabbing stuff. You know what I mean? Some people are out there like that. Some people are out there. Who's going to continue to protest in City Hall? Who's going to continue to protest at the Alderman's office? Who's going to continue to protest down in Springfield? There's ways that we can go about this besides just taking to the streets. But you're right. We have to educate ourselves on how to get the change we want. But right now, this stuff is just, people just took to the streets right away because they were frustrated, we're outraged. But I was thinking more about how laws could be unified nationally. Chokeholds or could do certain things in Minnesota that you can't do in Chicago. Maybe as a private citizen, I should have the right to intervene if I see something going on with a police officer. If they have their foot on my friend's neck, in the middle of the street, what can a private citizen do without going to jail? So there's a lot of things we could talk about.
Well, Mayor Lightfoot, she was proposing to have an anonymous tip line that's, if a police officer is acting poorly or out of, character. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, we need to, that's a good idea. I mean, we listen, before we can change policies, sometimes maybe changing personalities might help. Maybe police officers getting psychological examinations to see if they, are narcissistic or have a propensity towards, evil or something. Maybe they could do something like that. I don't have all the answers, but I know that.
Yeah. As long as you give politicians the same tests, I might be game for that. I mean, to your point, look, this is happening around the country too, and we can look around and we can make reasonable reforms or certainly have conversations. In San Diego, there's no more carotid restraints for exactly the reason of what happened with George Floyd. In New York City, they're banning police chokeholds, as you know. In Colorado, requiring police to intervene when fellow officers are acting unprofessionally. In New Jersey, there's a statewide use of force database that's been launched. But I mean, it's still, Jahmal, you have to appreciate and acknowledge that I think in 2019 there was something like 24 officer-involved shootings, most of which I believe were adjudicated to be good shootings, responsible, appropriate use of force. That's in Chicago, and there were 415 African-American, mostly men, murdered. So there's something else besides police, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, we wore a hoodie for Trayvon, took a knee for Philando, held my breath for Eric, walked through Quan, cried for Betty Jones. I mean, I'm tired of all the slogans, to be honest with you, man. I'm running around in circles, metaphorically almost. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, enough is enough. There's a real problem in this country, and it's dangerous being black. And the darker your skin color is, it feels like the realer your problems. And my students in my program notice this. I mean, even when a cop drives by with no sirens on, they jump up. They're like, "Whoa!" Well, why'd you jump?
I get scared too when cops drive by. I have to be
but part of this is the way that we talk about policing and sort of the fact-free way in which we do. I mean, you sort of talk past the point that I raised, which is a couple of dozen police-involved shootings, all races in Chicago in 2019, 415 Black Americans murdered in Chicago, not by police.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so the kids in your program and everybody else needs to acknowledge there's something else happening in a handful to a dozen neighborhoods in Chicago that's not happening everywhere in Chicago. And there should be a response to that, don't you think? I mean, talking about lives matter, and a life matters on the West Side just as much as it does in Streeterville. We're not acting like that, and I mean, we, like as an entire city, are not acting like that.
Yeah, I'd like to know in those cases, like, what were the motivations, and why did compassion, by the perpetrator for the victim fail? Like, I think, our society is like increasingly becoming dehumanizing. I think when you got a city as big as Chicago that brings, wealth and poverty together, there's a lot of financial incentives for robbery, which contribute to these violent crimes. I also think the anonymity of living in a city means that for people that commit crimes, there's like a lower probability of being recognized, or being arrested. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. And then you look at it's perfect conditions for crime in Chicago with under-resourced schools, divested communities. There's a high incarceration rate, high unemployment rate. This is a F5 storm, F4 storm that's going to lead to violence. I mean, that's why there's so much violence in the city.
Well, if you were mayor, what would you be doing right now?
I'd be protesting. I'd be protesting out with people. That's the number one
indefinitely?
thing I'd be doing.
I mean, just...
Say that again?
I said indefinitely, like you just keep protesting until when? When's the end game? Like...
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about day one. I would have been out there.
Yeah.
I've been out there, but I would also I take it as a time to educate people about actual organizing. There's a difference between force and violence. Protesting peacefully is really forceful because it can, if you done the right way, it can make institutions change. But violence is when you're destroying people's property. That's only violence. So force can be real powerful, but violence is always violence.
Yeah, we agree with that. That's a good point of commonality there. Jahmal Cole, activist, public speaker, founder and CEO of My Block, My Hood, My City, author of It's Not Regular: How to Recognize Injustice Hidden in Plain Sight. Jahmal Cole, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Peace out.
Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey